Welcome to the Not So Great Tennis Podcast. I love saying that. Welcome to the Great Tennis Podcast. I'm Steve Smith. On the line from Dallas is the host with the most, Dave Anderson, but not the most hair. Dave, are you there?
I'm here, loud and clear.
Yeah, and we have Ashley Hobson, veteran coach, and he's going to be with us. Ashley, are you there? Sound check.
I am. Thank you very much.
All right. No problem. Let me just do this. One-on-one doubles, Ed Crass. We'd have a word from our sponsor, but we don't have a sponsor. But with Eddie, baby, great guy. Have a beer or two, listen to some jazz music. I think people should look up Ed Crass one-on-one doubles, and we'll get going with Ashley here. Bradenton, Florida, State College of Florida. February 28th, he's got the one-on-one doubles tournament. But anyway, that's a shout out because people need to serve volley. With Ed, you have to serve volley. Tommy Haas at one time convinced him to give it a year where they could play the one-on-one double staying back. Now, another thing before I say a few things about Ashley, sometimes at the table when I'm going solo on this end, we pull up the Vic Braden chair. It's a collector's item from the Vic Braden Tennis College, plus a jacket that I was given. I've never worn it. Would never wear it, but it's from the USTA Sports Science, and it's Vic Braden's jacket. And Mike McLaughlin, who gave it to me, said that Vic was so proud to be part of the Sports Science Committee. But that's a few things. Let me go with what I've got written down here, Ashley, to tell our listeners a little bit about you. And you have to tell me how close I am. You run the Hobson Performance Center, currently in Bradenton, Florida. At the Hobson Performance Center, we believe champions are molded from the inside out. We'll cover the pyramid fundamentals for the average player, good player, world class. 39 years of experience, national coach of Davis Cup and Fed Cup teams, which is now the Billie Jean King. Coached ATP, WTA pros, as well as ITF juniors from around 60 countries. Coached and captained teams, international teams. Players have won pro doubles titles and, of course, national junior titles. Over 100 students have progressed to college tennis. Conducts coaching seminars. Educated, it's interesting, as a lawyer. Completed BA and LLB degrees. Fluent in 3 languages. I know Dave and I are fluent in 2, English and profanity. I'm staying away from the profanity here. Completed 5. This is 5 Ironman triathlons. I have to ask you about that. We're trying to carry the torch with tennis teachers from the past. Actually, 5 years with Dennis Van der Meer, 10 years with Peter Burwash. He also lists Chuck Creasy. I have to ask him also about last year's French Open junior champion, one of his students. But Ashley, once again, welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast. And
thanks a lot for having me, Steve.
Yeah, you've recently spent some time with Coach Dave Anderson and myself at a workshop we here had Ave Maria University, Ave Maria, Florida. But yeah, let's get this thing rolling. I think one thing, tell us where your tennis begins. How'd you get started in tennis? Been a long journey.
Yeah, very, very long journey. My dad was a great player, and his dad was a really good player back home. My dad actually in the West, he played for South Africa, top 3 in the 60s and 70s when he was retired. So that's, this is back in the 40s and 50s. So he was a real, real good player. And he played with a lot of, I know he played with Alan Fox. He says he came through the little town that we used to live in. And there were a lot of, I had 2 older brothers too. So I was the 3rd one down. Due to my first name, actually, I was supposed to be a girl. When they heard I was a boy, my first thing, my one brother said, yeah, it's a pity he'll have to play tennis. He thought that girls didn't have to play tennis. So it's been in my blood since I was born.
And where were you born? Where were you raised?
I was born in South Africa, but I actually was raised in a little country called Lesotho, which is it's the 3rd poorest country in the world growing up. I just got playing at the local club. I was hitting on the wall all the time. And by chance, in the 70s, there was a guy called Dan O'Connell from the ITF. He came to this country to coach tennis. They said they had a national training center there, which they didn't have. And he saw me hitting the wall and asked me to hit. And this is And we've been friends ever since. And Dad still lives in Phoenix, Arizona. And he really shaped my tennis career a lot. And he was from Illinois. Yeah, he honestly changed my life.
Oh, that's interesting. What's he doing now? Is he still with us?
Yeah, he's retired now. He worked in all of Africa for about 20, 25 years. Doug McCurdy got him the job. And then he went to Fiji and he started up the ITF Center in the Pacific Islands. And I think he ran that for another 20 years. We met again in Asia. I was with the Hong Kong Fed Cup team in New Zealand, and he was the ITF supervisor there. And he just couldn't believe that, was me. We hadn't seen each other for, about 20, 25 years.
Wow.
So just some great stories in tennis.
No, I remember his name. I never had the privilege of meeting him. Well, that's interesting. You have the same position as Coach Anderson and myself, being the youngest brother.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said about being the youngest brother. You got a few thumps, I'm sure, a few elbows.
Yeah, I have a deviated septum, which has never healed properly, so I still can't get it out of my right nostril.
Yeah, we'll just take turns asking questions. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Ashley, great talking to you again. Really enjoyed our time out in the workshop. That's a little bit you just shared with kind of how you entered into tennis. Can you give a little background as to how you entered into the, transition from playing the sport into the coaching realm?
Yeah. So one Easter vacation, I was playing the money tournament, and this guy just said, "Hey, I just came back from Dennis Van der Meer at Hilton Head, and my ears pricked up." And I was like, "Well, I'm about 1 year from graduating. I'm still kind of not sure if I want to be a lawyer or not." And I've been kicking around the idea of becoming a sports agent. And I was like, well, maybe, get my foot in the door there. Spoke to Dan O'Connell. He set the ball rolling. And that's my summer, which is December. January, December. I spent 2-3 months in Hilton. I think this was it was actually 1990. So I remember taking the flight back to South Africa with the Gulf War. Here's the storm had just started, and I think I had the airplane to myself. It was like, you have to sit on this huge Boeing. And after I had spent, I think it was like 2 months there, I said to them, hey, can I come back? So I graduated a year later, and then I went back and spent 5 years with them, and I just absolutely loved it. I earned just absolutely no money at all, but I just loved coaching. I got into it. Dennis steered me the route of, a couple of agents, obviously. Amanda Kutzer was around at the time, and it was Mayot. Mayot was the agent for her. And then I remember John Everett was an agent for Capriati because she played her a few times for us one round. But I just saw what they were kind of doing as agents, and I was like, that doesn't seem like my cup of tea, really. And I'm really enjoying the player development side of things. And I just have been given a huge amount of just great opportunities through the year. So the ball got rolling, and then, just never stopped. Here I am.
You mentioned to me a name from the past, a blast from the past, Tom Gilly. Of course, his wife, Julie, she's still, I think, way up the ladder as far as making the PTR what it is.
PTR, yeah.
But Tom, he went to this program we talk about often, Tyler Junior College, Tennis Tech. He was actually studying at the University of Chicago. It's such a difficult school to get into. I think he was studying Chinese history. And I remember he used to borrow like 3-4 books on a weekend, and he'd read, I'd say, okay, he read all 3 books over 2 days. And he was a very, very bright guy, but he spent years and years with Dennis.
Yeah, Tom was my direct, boss. And he mentioned you a lot of times. That's when your name came up on my radar, and of course from Craig Tiley as well, spoke with you.
Craig Tiley, yeah, his name's up for possibly being in charge of the USTA. Yeah, he was part of that tennis tech program. And then you ended up working with Burwash. Tell us a little bit about that. 10 years. You must have seen the world working for Peter.
Yeah. So I was traveling with players one summer, I think it was the mid-90s. Some Genesis players from a bunch of girls, if I remember rightly. Dan or Sean, who we've talked about, was traveling with some players from the Burwash group. We struck a friendship on the tour, and we were together through the summer, couple of 6 weeks or something. I think it was that summer circuit they used to have with the USGA. And he just said, if you're ever looking for something, give us a call. And this was, late 20s. And they got this position to run the Hong Kong Tennis Federation. They got the contract to run it. And then he called me up. I didn't kind of want to do any like resort coaching or something like that. So I just always want to stay in play development. And I just got lucky. And he had a contract for 3 months with the federation. And I went over there and I was there for 5 years. So it was like supercharged, turbocharged, coaching experience. And I was 30 years old, didn't know what I was doing, but I just worked like crazy, and it was an incredible experience.
Well, 5 years in Hong Kong, where else did you work for, Peter?
Before Hong Kong, I was actually I lived in Japan for a year for Dennis. So Dennis was working with Naoko Sawamaki. So it was like 21 in the world, and she wanted a foreign coach to be with her in Japan when she was in town. Ricky Brown was her primary coach, and Ricky would travel with her on the circuit. And so I went to Japan, and I worked with her when she was in town, and then I worked at a club with juniors in Tokyo when she wasn't in town. So I had spent a year in Japan before I moved to Hong Kong with Burwash.
I know you mentioned another tennis techer, Chris Carey. He was in Hong Kong too, right?
Yeah. I have a great picture of Chris and I going on a hike in Hong Kong. Yeah, mid-90s. And he told me, I'm going to go back, move to Tampa and work with Steve Smith. And I was like, yeah, great. He was like, Chris wanted to get back into, I think more play development style teaching too.
Yeah, I married a gal from Argentina. I know that when you work with Peter, I mean, late Peter, globetrotting. I think to lay down roots, a lot of the young coaches would be going from one place to the next. But yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, Ashley, what do you, as you look back at your experience with Van der Meer and Burwash, could you elaborate a little bit and what are the kind of biggest takeaways from your experiences with being at Van der Meer? And then if you could add to that with what you really gathered, some things that really helped you out in your experiences with Burwash.
I mean, they were my, just the foundation of kind of what I ever learned. And, I would just recommend to any young coach trying to make his way into coaching, just get a mentor who knows their stuff and, learn from them as much as I could. It was great. I mean, Dennis, the obvious things, his memory for people was amazing. And then obviously his progressions of learning were very, very good, and dealing with large groups of people we were in the heyday of his time. I think in the 90s, I mean, there would be 20, top 100 pros, per week coming in training, a bunch of South Africans, of course. It was a great time to be there. I think those are my the takeaways is mainly the progressions and working with a big group of people. There were some good people he used to bring through. So people were always coming, giving him, throwing out new ideas. Jim Lure was there in the late 80s, so got a little bit of time with him. And then Dr. Bryce Young came, and I spent a lot of time with him. And then, all the people used to bring in. I remember he brought in the Dallas Cowboys football coach, the trainer. His name was Randy Smythe. So, it was great to work with all these top people in the field, and then obviously there's symposiums there every year, and you have all these other people coming in. So just the learning was everything was accelerated. And then, the big thing with Peter was that he was extremely creative, and he made me understand why the ball goes where it does, which I could, when I thought of at Dennis, I never could quite understand, well, I was still trying to play all that at the time. It was, my mid to late 20s, and it's made such a big, it's like the scales dropped from my eyes when I went to Peter, and he used the wrist on the serve and getting the ball in the court more, and then obviously the contact zone, which now we understand, but at the time I was like, this is groundbreaking to me. And then obviously with Peter, I don't know if you knew all his rules, like when you came in, you had to spend a month, and I spent a month in the woodlands, 320 hours of training. And then the conference they had every year, they're flying all the coaches from all over the world, and then you would have a week of learning. And each coach would generally give a talk during the week. And it was start at 7 a.m. and it finished at like 10 p.m. at night. And everyone was wired but exhausted and learning such a lot. Doing 10 years, that was really, really, really great. And I have so many good colleagues from those times still to this day. It was a great time to be there.
Peter Burwash. I had the opportunity to revise his general recreation curriculum into a full degree. It was a comprehensive tennis. And Peter was the first one to reach out. Yeah. So I have to shout out to Peter to for us to be recognized, and that was a beginning of us to be put on the tennis map. His organization, basically throughout the 80s, would come every year for a 25-hour weekend workshop. It was excellent. He had a lot to do with the improvement. His organization had a lot to do with the improvement of that program over the years. Learned so much from Peter. Dennis as well. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, those names, I don't know if the people in the industry today, but when you hear Peter Burwash and people that were affiliated with him, it just, one word always came out automatically, and that was just professionalism. I think it was very, very cool to think about. This question's kind of random, Ashley, but did your father, being a tennis player, he must have interacted with, I'll throw two names at you, Russell Seymour or Billy Freer or Cliff Drysdale, three names. Was that his era, or was he a bit older than that?
He was a bit older than that.
Okay.
Yeah, of course I know all those names in tennis from South Africa, but he was a little older than that. Yeah, incredible player.
Tell us a little bit about your work today, jumping ahead in Bradenton, Florida.
I'm just running a small facility, and I call it play development done right, because and you've alluded to this a few times, when you work for other people at clubs or federations or facilities, there's different agendas. Right now my agenda is just to make players as good as they can be, and as people, especially as tennis players. So there's no absolutely zero agenda about trying to get as many players as I can into the program, make it as deep as I can according to these. I've got this little pyramid I've been developing through the ages with the 9-stage play development process, so, and it's, it starts with character. So when you start to talk about that, Anne Maria's really, hit a chord with me.
Coming back to Chuck Creasy is listed as well as one of your mentors. Yeah, I think when people hear Chuck Creasy, they certainly think of character development. Why don't you make a few comments, a shout out for Chuck?
Yeah, in the early 2000s, I moved back to the U.S. after being 5 years in Hong Kong, and I just basically wanted to start an academy. So Peter said to me, "Well, you've got Palm Coast, Atlanta, or Palm Springs." And so I remember Dennis was saying to me, "Tennis in Atlanta is so huge." So, and they had the contract there at the Stone Mountain Tennis Center. So I was like, "Yeah, let me try something in Atlanta." So I started an academy there, and I think Chuck came through and was, we did the massive center at one stage just before, the World Trade Center bombings. There was the sponsorships. There was a mirror like 45 tournaments a year. Big. I mean, we had NCAA's there, NCAA women's, and there were like 250K challenges. And I met Chuck there, and we just hit it off. Of course, I'd heard of him before too. So during my South Carolina times, we'd come over to Clemson a few times, and I think he'd actually done some stuff with Dennis and both players over. So yeah, and obviously he's the guru on momentum at the time, so it was a great, I've just been absolutely blessed with great people in my life, and kind of it's great. And as we get older, I think relationships become so much more important than everything else. So I think for me, the time with all these great coaches, spent some time with Ken Rosewell on the court and Michael Chang, and in Hong Kong, he would come over, and Neil Frazier, of course, Ross Laver, and good experience as well. But yeah, it's just incredible, and very fortunate life I've had, Steve.
Yeah, so many of those names. Neil Frazier, I remember watching him play in Grand Masters, and he misses a shot, and he yells out, "I can believe it." Where, so many juniors will miss a shot, and they yell, "I can't believe it." You hit a ball in the bottom of the net, you should believe it. Yeah, he passed away not too long ago, Wimbledon champion. He was in on Arthur Ashe beating Jimmy Connors in 1975, Wimbledon, saying, "This is what I think you should do against Jimbo." Not to. And Ashe, actually, it's a famous match now where he played a different style. He mixed it up. He took the pace off the ball, and it was really a shock to everyone. But yeah, Neil Frazier was in on that. Rosewell, I mentioned his name today, 1954, 1974, in the Wimbledon final. He was on all these names. I was told Michael Chang was working with Sam Querrey and Stevie Johnson and a few others. And he was saying, "Guys, I was labeled a baseliner, but I came to the net more than you guys. Because you guys don't even think about coming in." And those guys are great, great tennis players. But yeah, it's amazing what you can learn by being exposed to great players and listening. Now, a lot of times they're not the ones to do the technical work, but definitely the character work, and there's so much beyond technique. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, actually, you've been in a lifetime, and I'm curious to hear your take on how you would say it changed coaching young juniors, player development, not necessarily stroke production, but you can answer this any way you want. We go back in a time machine, and it's 1996 compared to what is now 2026. What are some, things that you notice in dealing with young athletes today versus back then?
Yeah, big changes, Dave. I think one of the biggest ones, which has struck me in the last 3 to 4 years working with Hayden Ligon, was the fact now there's a pretty big entourage even for the good juniors. So you're dealing with obviously the parents, but then you're dealing with maybe a physical coach, and you're speaking to a psychologist as well, and so you're just not just the primary coach, and you're doing the mental, physical, tournament scheduling. You're just one part of a small part of a big organization of players. So that's my biggest one. And then obviously your input.
Can I interrupt you for a moment, Ashley? And let me ask you your thoughts on that. That word, you hear it all the time now, team. Everybody has a team around them. So what are your thoughts on that? Because that's a trend that I see too. Teams, my grandkids are 6 and 8 and I'm running into kids not much older than that where people are assembling a team. But what do you think of that concept? And as a positive and negative, how do you view it?
I think it's tougher as a coach, definitely, to get your word across, because the word is diluted by maybe 3 to 5 other people,
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, I find it just tougher to coach like that. If you're all on the same page, it's great. But if one person says, "No, I think we should go to these tournaments," and then the agent is saying, "Okay, no, do need to play these tournaments because of such a reason." So, for example, I just recently worked with Toyota, a special exempt, because he finished the top 20 in the US, tried top 20 in the ITF, and so all the special exempts, he's going to all these 100,000s, 200Ks, to trying to get into 250s. And I'm like, you're just not ready to play here yet. But because of your special exempts, you can play there, So then you're butting heads with the parents and butting heads with the agent to try to fast track them to the top. But maybe it's not the right schedule that they should be playing at that time.
No, thanks for your input. With Braden, he's such a nice guy. He was not confrontational, but if you heard a parent say, "We play today at 2," in the back room, Vic would go, "We play." I didn't know the mom was hitting balls, or I didn't know the dad was hitting balls. I think like Ash Barty, wasn't so long ago where she was playing as number 1 in the world. Her father used to approach the parents of her opponent and say, "Hey, you'd really be doing us a favor today if you'd play high and slow. If you just try to keep a lot of balls in play. My daughter doesn't have very good shot tolerance, so if you want to beat her, keep a lot of, that type of thing. You just go right up." And he wasn't trying to it wasn't any trickery. He was just saying, "Hey, my daughter doesn't like playing against a player who does this. So if you want to have an edge, this is what I would do against her." That's just, I've heard parents say they don't want their juniors to play practice matches because then their opponent will know their secrets. In the end, there are no secrets.
Yeah.
Actually, you're in the war zone there in terms of South Florida, and near it, and Dallas with its growth has become that way. But what advice could you give to parents and players and coaches, really, with the what we call the bop and shop mentality? Because since I met you, I got on your Instagram and have been following. I really appreciate all your character-driven posts that you have. But the era we're in, the bop and shop mentality is more prevalent. What advice would you give to people on that? Moving around from club to club and pro to pro.
Yeah. Geez, Dave, I think, you've been this as long as I have. As I'll say, I'm in a great situation right now, and I'm not trying to. I first came down to Bradenton. I came to school, and they invited me down to come and train here, and I loved it because I felt that, well, I want to challenge myself against the biggest academy in the world down the road. So it was a great challenge for me. That the goal was to get people in through the door because the school had just started. So, as Steve has alluded to a few times, if you want to lose players, make them, shadow swing and do the right thing. And it's now I'm at the point where I don't really mind. So, I know you're at a club, so it's a little bit of a different. It's it's who your boss is really, which always makes it tough. But I'm just very, very, I think, honest, and I just say, look, I want to don't come here if you don't want a long-term relationship with me. Try and have a long-term relationship. And I have a lot of players who are coming in from other states, from Minnesota and other places, and from India, a couple of kids. And I say to them, look, I want to see you over the summer. I want to see you for Orange Bowl and Eddie Tour here. And I want to see you in April. So it's not, I'm coaching you all the time, but I'm looking for long-term relationships. And with that's how we can both grow together. And that's how I can help you the most and keep in contact with them throughout time. But that's just putting it out there from the beginning, asking, 3 questions, what do you think your work ethic is, and asking this to the parent and the child, work ethic and abilities to be coached, and then the ability to, stick with the process and have the discipline. I'm in a lucky situation just because I'm not beholden to anybody.
Yeah, it's nice to work. I have to say this with Dave Online, where there's no members. Obviously there's a plus to being at a place like Dave Anderson's at. It is a phenomenal tennis club. But over the years, I've tired of that, membership and their privileges. I think it's gotten better in some ways. Years ago, I don't think clubs were athletic driven. They were more driven to the dance floor and the bar. And, I think that has improved. Let's go back, Dave. You're talking about character. How do people find out? How would they go to your Instagram page? What is it?
It's just Hobson Tennis.
Hobson Tennis. Okay.
On Instagram. Yeah. I'm not too great with technology either, so I don't do it all the time, but I have some people to help me. My young coaches are great.
With recently, one of your juniors won the French Open. Could you tell us who that is and a little bit about their story?
Well, I met the Biggin brothers with their dad during COVID or 2019 or 2020. And they'd moved to Bradenton. They'd been given an offer at the big academy down the road. And they just wanted more of a close-knit coaching group, and the coach that they were currently working with had just left. So they were looking around, and one of my players played. One of Mika is at Princeton right now, and Kaden just did a year at UCLA and is now playing on the circuit. But and we just hit it off pretty well. Dad is still the primary coach, but we work whenever we're in town, and we travel a little bit together. So it's a good 5-year relationship, and we still chat.
Oh, that's great. Go ahead, Dave.
Ashley, am I correct in understanding you just had a book or ebook come out? And if that is the case, could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I've been working on this book for honestly about 15 years, and honestly, I just got tired of handing out pieces of paper to the students I work with. And when you handed me that piece of paper, the habit poem at Ave Maria, I was very upset because it would be such a great thing to have. And it's like, dang, there I am. I have this thing out. I've got 50 copies, and I didn't put the habit poem in there, which I never knew about. So, I just got tired of handing out pieces of little paper. And I've kind of built this developmental pyramid, this 9-stage developmental pyramid, which I've presented at a few conferences, and I just this is my basically the structure of which I work, and it's basically that pyramid. And then at the back is a player journal, and then there's 50 post-match evaluations, so you can write in the back. You can write in your evaluation, and I wrote the post-match evaluation where the learning happens. In the simple questions, there's 3 simple questions, but I got like 50 of them out there. So players who train with me, I've got to try and fill these out after matches, so post-match. And then I've got a little bit of basically a developmental plan similar to what the USDA do. Now I've got 10 of those in the back of the book. So it's a workbook, and it's my thoughts from this 9-stage developmental plan, which starts, with character, then developing athletic abilities, the second part, and just, the kids, the players on the tour, they're just super athletes. I think tennis is the most athletic sport there is. That's getting even tougher. So this athletic ability, I think, is just really key. When I lived in China, the kids, I always noticed they couldn't serve. And one summer I went back to the Woodlands, and I took about 40 of those little Nerf footballs, brought them back, and put about 10 in each player's bag. And it was about summer of 95, 96. And I had those kids, my developmental squad at the time, like 10 to 12-year-olds, and they just threw that ball for years. And when they were 16, all their serves were just so good. And I was just like, yeah, it's the Nerf football. So this is athletic ability. And then there's obviously this GreatBase, which you have the court, understanding how the court predicates how the game is played. And then the technique and footwork. And I, follow a great deal of what you guys do on the GreatBase. And then this concept of overload training, reading those books, was the early 2000s with, what's his name, There's Talent Code, and Malcolm Gladwell's book, what is it? Outliers.
Outliers, yeah.
Outliers, yeah. Daniel Coyle.
Yeah, Dan Coyle too, yeah. And then just, doing that overload training, which is just making training better. The simple stuff, the sock, the footballs, weighted rackets, use of the metronome, which is one of my favorites, is just, to put it on 54 and have the kids try to rally consistently at 54, and try and make the game more difficult than it is. So when you play it, it's easier. So, mentally have the kids play breakers, and then have them, if you're up 9-6 in the breaker, we have maybe a wood rack in the court, maybe one of those small paddles, and paddle rackets, the smaller ones, not paddle racket, the saber, smaller rackets. Have the kid use, got to close out the breaker with the wood racket or with the saber, so to get in the head. So overload can be mental, physical, or emotional. And then going up towards the top of the pyramid is tactics and strategy, and then Chuck Bresci's momentum control to a large extent. I think that's often a undervalued thing with the momentum control of the court. It's easy to players using it a lot now. I mean, they lose the set. What do? They go to the bathroom. So, at the very basis, even the 12s know this right now. So it's the way that the game has changed, unfortunately. I don't think it's very sportsmanlike all the time, but it is a factor. And then mental emotional toughness, and then tolerance and periodization would be the top of the pyramid. So I'd love you guys to tell me what I left out there, because it started at 5 and then it got to 7 and now it's at 9. And that's when I wrote the book.
And actually, how does someone get hold of the ebook?
It's on Amazon, Steve.
Okay.
Or send me an email. I'll mail one to you. I've got 50 copies. So that's my big run. But it's mainly just, my players that I work with. I'm just tired of giving out those little pieces of paper,
right.
And just there needs to be something. And then, of course, I think for me, the most important at the back would be the post-match evaluation. It's just not enough learning after matches. Come off a match, and if they won, definitely there's going to be no journaling. And if they lost, well, they might. But there's not enough learning after matches.
Actually, you say that with one of our pillars, Bill Jacobson, with CompuTennis. What a tennis mind. So, he would, people would play, and then two players would be interviewed, asked question after question, and it was amazing that they knew so little about the match they just played. Post analysis. I don't think there's enough of that in tennis. Going back to throwing the football, Coach Ely is here visiting, and he had an adult player today. It's just one of the best drills ever, just throwing a racket, getting out on the field, and we combine that with running technique. But that certainly worked for Richard Williams. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, Ashley, kind of a change in the direction of the questioning, but with your staff and with your background with PBI, and you mentioned the onboarding with PBI new coaches and the incredible hours of training that you had to go through. What's your approach with professionals and coaches when you bring them in? Your onboarding process, and how do you go about that?
Bring in new coaches, you mean, Dave?
Yeah. So when a new coach begins to work for Hobson Performance, your onboarding process that, is there, do they study your manual you just referred to? Is there observation? Is there it probably just in contrast to how when you went to work for PBI and how they, mandated the onboarding.
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're saying here is just so important for new coaches to come in and say, because when I say, for instance, went to Van der Meer, I had done Tennis University. I think 5 of them. I think I've still got them somewhere, the Tennis University certificates, but that was a lot of time, but there still wasn't any onboarding in terms of, okay, this is play development now, and a little bit different. So, and I know that when academies are growing quickly, there's very little onboarding done and coaching young players. Right now, I've actually got a little boy from Venezuela who just started with me this year. He's in December with me, actually, just to have a little trial, and now we're with him. And there's 2 other coaches with me, and we are, we spend an hour each with him a week, and there's a curriculum. I should maybe send it just to actually have a look at it. And it just, goes from, technique, and then goes to, tactics, and but it starts obviously with the bottom of the pyramid, basically, what kind of players we're looking to produce out here. But I think it's super important. And we have a little bit of stuff online. There's some presentations that we put out there, so we want them to watch it and know it. I think if you try to build a program, obviously the first thing you got to do is define your culture and what you want to do, and each place is different. So going to Hong Kong work for a federation, or coming to formal academy in Atlanta, and even coming to Florida has been different, because when I was in Atlanta, it's all the Southern kids. There was a certain kind of behavior which was a given. But coming down to Florida, it's every single nationality you can find coming here. So they come with their own set of values and experiences, and then you have to try and mold them to how you'd like them to be the most valuable person and player. Going back to what you're saying about Paul Jacobs and Steve, it's funny, but Tom Gilly would make us carry those CompuServe, like this is like a keypad, and you have to type in from each point. You had to type in this software that
the CT 120.
I can't remember what it's called, but geez, I hated it. It was so tough. When the players came off a match, your brain would be half exploding. You have to focus so hard to get that thing going.
Yeah, speaking of Craig Tiley, pretty talented guy. I had 2 CT 120s, and he could run them both at the same time. When he was with us, he did a lot of off-court work. Well, let me ask this. I'll precede this simple question with a joke, an old joke that doesn't often get laughs when you share it with juniors. But if you can speak 3 languages, you're trilingual. Speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. Speak 1 language, you're American. What are the 3 languages you speak?
So I grew up in this little country called Lesotho, which when people ask how to say I'm South African, which, my passport was South African. I was just born across the border, basically, just because the doctors and the hospitals were a little bit more. I speak a language called Sotho from the country of Lesotho. So it's and I can speak it pretty well. I did it actually in college as one of my easy courses, and I was coaching the professor. So, and then of course Afrikaans. So I can speak a little bit of Dutch, and that's from the Afrikaans. I lived in Belgium for a few months coaching. So they just say, the Afrikaans sounds just like my grandmother talking. So pretty useless languages to have. I wish I could speak Mandarin and Spanish. That's what I'd like to speak.
The Afrikaner, I've been fortunate enough to spend so much time with South Africans. 2 of our mentors, Van der Meer and Jacobson, pillars, are South African.
Yeah.
With the discipline of the Afrikaner. Wow. The kids are certainly yes sir, no sir. What would be your comment on that comment?
Yeah, so I grew up in this country, but when I was 10 years old, my parents, in their wisdom, shipped me off to boarding school in South Africa. So I spent, and then at 16, my parents actually moved to South Africa. So my first 10 to 6 was at this English boarding school. Discipline was second to none. I don't know if you ever read Elon Musk's book by the guy Michelson. It's the first page. If you read that, you notice it was pretty tough. If I say stuff to my kids, but they would have to do. The discipline and the strictness was second to none. We had to go to the military, for 2 years. Either you went to college first or you went to the military. My brothers both went to college first and changed their degrees a number of times. And my dad said, well, you're going to go to the army first because your brothers are wasting my money. So I went to the military for 2 years. Very, very, disciplined background. So that's kind of been why I just feel that, you can just outwork, out hustle, out trying and grit wise. I think it's just a great upbringing.
Well, I think one of the secrets of Roger Federer for sure is Lynette Federer's mom. If you read about Roger, like the time he dyed his hair blonde when he won the Orange Bowl, and he went home and got his hair cut short as possible, and he wore the hat way down over his ears. And one of his mates said, "Why are you doing that?" He says, "I don't want my mom to be reminded." She thought that was a little bit too showy, but yeah, the Afrikaner, you'd go to school and get paddled, and you go home and you get paddled for getting paddled. South Africa is one of the last places on planet Earth where they drop corporal punishment, but that's that fear of being bent over and getting a whack. We've certainly gone a long, long ways away from that these days. Another question from your bio: tell us about being a triathlete, Iron triathlons at that.
It was a bucket list thing. That's all. Just a bucket list thing. And I actually did a full Ironman in Mexico in 2011. That was my last big one. And just trying to see how, I think I just turned 40 something, and I just was like, okay, can you still suffer? And I think it's always good to learn a new thing. I'm trying to learn to kite surf right now here in Florida, and I'm the worst. And it's just putting myself in a situation of being a student again. I think it's really, really important to keep doing this over in your life. Just become a student, learn again. Become a student, learn again. So that's my.
That's powerful. Say that again. What are you learning now? I missed that.
I'm trying to learn how to kite surf right now.
Okay.
So, and just putting yourself in the position of a total novice, I think it's really important to do it any time in your life.
When you were at our workshop, I was telling you about this young girl from Minnesota who's here. The Renaissance kid, just a great kid. Musician, singer, very, very good tennis player, but doesn't play seriously. Started in the GreatBase many, many years ago, so she just has the fundamentals. She was here for, like, say, a week straight and just started playing better and better, but she doesn't play that much tennis. But she runs very unassuming, too. She runs a 2:16 half mile. And talking to you at the workshop you attended recently, you tell us about your daughter. She's a runner, and her has like a 2:10, 2:11 half mile.
Yeah, she's around about that time. She plays a bit of tennis too, and she's about a 7 UTR. But she doesn't play a lot too, but she runs too. So I think for my kids is just, I think suffering is a good thing. We grew up like that, and I think we were always trying to get away from suffering, but I think it's a good thing. So I don't care what sport they're playing, or I think just learning to overcome obstacles is a major thing, and that's just, I love tennis. I just think tennis is the greatest sport to teach life, and I've always felt that we misrepresent tennis. We say, it gives you 7 more years of life, apparently. But I think it's just the main thing is it's such a great sport to teach you life skills and to teach you to just become a better person.
One thing with running, I always think of Zola Budd, running barefoot, and it's great for athletes to run barefoot. One thing about the boarding school you went to, but you had to play a different sport every season, correct?
Yeah, so we played rugby in the winter. If you're a little bit nerdy, then you played field hockey. If we played rugby in the winter, one of my guys on the 15 team actually went out to make the Springboks as a prop, which is the front row. And he played in the, I think, 94, 95 World Cup. He was just huge. I mean, huge, and he could run super quick. But yeah, we're just multi-sported. And so we didn't play, tennis all the time at all, maybe 3-4 days a week. And then, as I said, my parents moved to the city where I lived in. That was at boarding school, that luckily, when I was 16. And that's when I decided I was just going to play tennis only. It was good that at that time to just start to, focus just on tennis. I think we'd always played tennis, but not that intensely as I did when I started playing 16.
Actually, can you walk us through what a day at pretend I'm a 14-year-old with a 10 UTR. How does a day at Hobson Performance look for me?
So Mondays and Fridays, we've broken those down to half days. Dave, so it means that we're only doing an afternoon session.
Mm-hmm.
So that's going to be 3 or 4 hours long. Some sort of 2:30, some sort of 2:30, depends on their age and how much we think they can take. And I'm a small operation on purpose, but we want to have, so the kids always can't compete with each other. So we have UTRs at our facility every single weekend. So we have Mondays and Fridays. It's just that smaller session in the afternoon. And I say small, I mean 3 to 4 hours. So that small. And then on the middle of the week, then we go 7:30 to 10:30 and take a break. And then we go 3:30 to 6:30. So it runs around to about 25 hours a week of tennis. 20. And when I was running this school in Brenton a few years ago, we were actually doing more. We were doing 10:30 to 10:30, and then 3:30 to 6:30. But I thought it was just a bit much, and the kids were just a little bit not as receptive on Thursday.
Yeah.
I've kind of watered it down a little bit, but I feel that it's a smart move. And I must say, I didn't do that easily. I actually spoke to the late Andy Brandy about this. Andy was one of my mentors because I was working with Martin Dam when he was in the under 14s, but Martin was training with me from when he was 10 to 14, and Martin was overseen by Andy Brandy from the USDA, so Andy would come down. So that was Andy's. Andy was like, "Yeah, that's enough tennis. Actually, that's enough." So that's my schedule from Andy Brandy. Steve, I don't mind stealing from any other coaches, and I'm always trying to learn stuff. Andy was one of my mentors here when I came down to Florida, and a great guy.
Tennis World is a small place. I have to thank the late Andy Brandy. Andy and his brother Joe, because of them, I had a open invitation to go to Hopman's anytime. And even when I, back living in my van and playing tournaments. But through Andy, that's how I get connected with really decades of time with Welly Van Horn. But the Tennis World is a small place. Martin Dahm, who was so good at a young age, his daughter was recently given a scholarship to George Washington. And Jackie Calla, who's been in our program, she started off as a 5-year-old. Her dad worked with us for 15 years. So that name came up just the other day. We had a podcast where we just talked about Andy. I could tell Andy Brandy's stories all day long. We were working, I'll tell you one very quick, and I've told this to players who played for me in Florida. So we were in Boca West, and so then we went up to West Hampton, and he was the overall director, and I was the camp director. So I was very fortunate to work under Andy. So we show up, and I'm not a very big guy, but Andy's smaller than I am, and what a bag of intensity. So guy pulls up in this sporty Mercedes, and he's got on the field clothes and the gold chain, and this is back in the late 70s. So we were putting up windscreens, and we were all just freezing because the wind's coming off the ocean. It's a place on the beach. And so anyway, Andy, the guy wanted, he goes, "How much for a tennis lesson?" And he goes, "We're not open until Monday," or something. And the guy had some words with him, and then Andy got in this argument with him. And next thing I know is I was playing this guy. And Andy Brandy's just walking back and forth and saying, Smith, if you lose one game, you're fired. You lose one game. I did beat the guy 0-0, but he had this pancake flat serve, and I was absolutely just frozen. I could barely hang out of the racket from being outside putting up windscreens with Andy and a couple other guys. And so anyway, I squeaked through that, but he was just so intense. That's an Andy Brandy story for you.
Yeah, can you? I didn't catch the part going back in your history of your tennis. Tell us how you got to the States out of South Africa and where you ended up in, I'm assuming, in collegiate tennis and your experience there.
No, Dave, I actually I played on the tour straight out of high school. And then and that was a lot during my Army time. So I'm going to preface that because I want to get out of that Army base as much as I could. So I was playing a lot during that time, and then I went to law school, and I got to the U.S. through Dennis Van der Meer and Hilton Head. Spent a bit of time there over one vacation, then came back and spent 5 years there. Yeah, I like. When I say I like tennis, I like coaching tennis. I just like human performance. Any form of human performance is fascinating to me. Whether you're a runner or a triathlete or a tennis player, obviously tennis is my absolute passion. But just human performance is just fascinating.
Did the opportunity or the thought of playing college tennis in the U.S. Come about at all, or had you made your mind up you were going straight onto the tour?
When I was in at the Army, I was kicking around trying to play in the futures and that, but I couldn't. I could see that no, I'm not going to make any money here. And it was so small at the time. South Africa was like it was on the I don't know if you were able to say, I think on the Sugar Circuit every summer they had like these series of tours like 8 weeks, and there was all top players there that you could see, okay, this guy's going to make it. This guy, you just don't stand a chance. And just also going to law school. My older brother was a lawyer, so my dad was, we listened to our parents. Your dad said you're going to do this, you are going to do it. So yeah, he was like, oh, you guys can form a law firm together. And so I was like, yeah, well, it's an interest. And then, I had the idea of being an agent, sports agent. I thought about that, but spending time around some sports agents when I was, we had chance to travel with Manicuture at the time, and I've got other players, that didn't look very appetizing to me.
You've been in this country now. I follow up on the U.S. I know years ago Dave was proactive with the USTA. Have you done any things with the USTA? I mean, have they reached out to you? I mean, as far as to be connected from a player development standpoint? Any comments on that?
Yeah, I've been over there a couple of times. Dave Ramos had a good little girl called Brooke Lawson who was one of the top kids at the time with that group of players. Like Maya Joint is the one that's broken through there. And actually, no one thought that she would be the one that broke through, but she has broke through actually for Australia now. So, like Australia, but yeah, I've been over there a few times and run. I had time there, but not too much. I was with the federation in China, and I made a commitment to myself never to do that again, ever. After that, so it was by committee, and it's I've always been pretty individualistic, so it's tough to work with a big organization like that.
Committee. There's another joke for you. Is that the good Lord took 7 days to create planet Earth, and then He turned it over to a committee. Look what happened.
Yeah, very, very true.
When you go to a meeting and there's 8 people at the meeting, and everybody has a different agenda. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about having to be small. I know Dave has the challenge of having 25 pros. I did that for a short period of time for a large company. You've been so generous with your time. Let's wrap it up. Dave, why don't you go with another question, and I've got a couple too.
Yeah, I'll just ask you, Ashley, advice that you would give to a young coach that, there's kind of an absentee or absence of them in this era, people wanting to get into the profession. So what advice would you give to a young man or woman looking to start out in the profession?
Definitely, number one is who you hang out with in the beginning. Your mentors in the beginning are going to shape your future. So, get a good mentor, learn from that person. And for a long time, I see internships. Oh, this is a 6-week internship. I spent 5 years for Dennis and really didn't earn a penny. But I wouldn't give it I wouldn't give it a time up for anything, just for that learning experience. So I think just really get some people in. Another thing, Peter once told me, he says, if you haven't spent 5 years in TBI, you still don't understand the concept. So he said 5 years, and I thought initially, I was like, no, he's just saying that. And then as I got longer in the company, and I could come to one annual meeting and go to the next annual meeting years later, I was like, yeah, he's right. It took 5 years for me to learn all the concepts. So, find a good mentor and really stick with them, and stick with them for a while. I mean, we live in this instant world, and people go and I've got 2 great young coaches with me right now. The one's going back to Argentina, unfortunately, but just great guys, and they've been with me 5 years. And I'm just trying to help them be better coaches, better people all the time. And it's been very rewarding. But I think that's the key: is you need to, spend time with somebody who knows what they're doing, and cares for your development as a coach as well. I think that's the key. And I'll tell you one last thing. My parents passed away within 6 months of each other, and I went to their funerals back home. So my friends came, who I went to college and high school and law school with, and man, they look so old. It was like, and they all said, geez, well, you look so young. I was like, yeah, well, I've never had a care in my life. I've just done what I've done, with absolute passion and loved it. But, I was like, they just looked drained of life, and they'd been, very successful people back home. And, but I think if you want to have a good life and live healthy and get out in the sun every day, and I think there's so many positives to this life. I think that was one of my big ones when I it was 2021, and they were all like, and it made impression me. I was like, wow, yeah, you guys have all got these, boring, stress-driven jobs, and I just had fun.
No, that's great advice. Thank you for a coach. What about for a parent, a young parent or parents?
Yeah, I mean, that's a super tough one. I mean, I just think the parents are just drawn by so many different things. I just think they need to, find somebody and trust somebody and stick with the process. And the person's got to prove themselves, to the parents as well. And I think just, when players are shopping and bopping, as you say, the problem is that, sometimes there's no dovetailing of information. So you're getting this information from one coach, then you go to another coach who tells you either information which is totally different, which is hurtful, or they don't know where you are in your development, as a player. So then, you're just regressing all the time. But if somebody says, okay, here's the plan, this is step A, let's get technical skills right, and then let's go step B, let's, get this right. And just by the way, I have a lot of humor just recently. I'm seeing these stats come through. I love technology and innovation and stats. And, you see the shot quality. What's the forehand shot quality, backhand shot quality, serve shot quality. And, the use has, so you have Felix to a 9.6 and the Menard has a 9.5, and they play each other. And then you have other people, not saying, technique isn't that important. But why are we rating the shot quality so highly then if we're not saying that, the technique needs to be correct? So, yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout answer.
No, it's great. Well, you recently attended our workshop. It's great. Someone with so much experience to come to a workshop. But you told me during the workshop that you had Greg Lesour. He spent 3 years in an internship with us, but you told me that you had him in. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, he actually worked for you at one time, but then for you to have him in to share things with your coaches. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually got Greg over to the US. I met his mother and his sister Monique in the late 90s in China. There was a 50K or 100K event there or something. She's like 200, I think, WTF, about that. And so I met mom and dad. There was only two blondes there, and I was the only other European around. So I walked up and said hi, and it turns out to be Greg's sister, mom. So this is how the story came about. And then he reached out to me, I think, in the 2000s sometime. Yeah, he came to work with me, and I couldn't further the visa with him. I'd love to have had him. Greg's a fantastic guy. I couldn't. I was just a one-man band basically, and just small operation, just visa problems. But we've had him over here a couple of times, and Greg and I chat. We chat tennis quite a lot. I'll call him up. He'll call me up. I'm talking to him about an app right now, which I'd like to talk to you both about an app. My daughter's a good runner, so there's this app on running, and kind of like what you did at Eva Maria. You did that talk on. No, it was Johan. Johan did the talk on running, and foot position, foot angle. There's an app out there like that, and I'm like, we need to make one like this for tennis. but I'll talk to you about it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know he with OTI, online tennis instruction. He's certainly making an impact. We need people who. There's a few others that we've trained that they're reaching people and giving out good information. So it's very powerful. What were some of your takeaways from the workshop? I love how you mentioned the word suffering. Tell us how we can be better. We need to suffer.
Well, I took 6 pages of notes, and my coach the day before took a couple of pages. So we've got a lot of stuff out there. I've just dictated it into my notes, so we haven't broken it down. But I think we're going to get to it this week. I actually shut down for Christmas, first time ever in about 40 years. But just just it's getting old much. I'm 60 right now, so it's starting to wear on me. But I loved it. I was just impressed with obviously the character stuff, because you do all this work, you question each, are you going to go home and do your homework? And the saying, "The hungry lion hunts best," is one of my favorite sayings, and it comes down to character. Like, and are these kids going to take this incredible information and do anything with it? So that's the drum I'm beating a lot right now. Is just character. Are you going to do the work? Are you going to want to do this? And that was a big takeaway. I think talent will take you so far, but there's so. I mean, to be a good tennis player, when I wouldn't say good tennis player, top 200 in the world, you're just an incredible person, an incredible player. It's the percentage of making it is so small. You can't leave any door, not knocked upon. No, I was and I was impressed with the group that came out there. I was impressed with the way that you ran it, the energy that they all gave, and I was impressed. Actually, I called Greg up on the way back, and I was like, "Dang, I thought I was a military taskmaster. You're up there too." I think I'm not as tough as you are, so you might have been in the military too, Steve. But I like that a lot. I mean, I think it's so valuable for the kids of today. They're coddled so badly.
60 years old. Good hair, huh, Anderson? Looks so young.
I think I gotta check it. I gotta check your ID, actually.
Good genetics.
Well, go ahead, Dave. Why don't you have a closing word?
Yeah, well, like I said, it's been the beauty of tennis. You get to meet some amazing people, and I'm glad that our paths crossed down there in Florida, and looking forward to staying in touch. And thank you for your time tonight and everything you've shared for the podcast.
Yeah, likewise.
No, thank you. It was an honor.
I think with the word suffering, I love that. But certainly you're a lifetime learner, and that's what it's all about. We want to get up every day, and as coaches, we have to practice what we preach. And we've just the old Jim Verdict. I'm sure you spent time with Coach Verdict too, with your time with Van der Meer.
Yeah.
Don't you want to get 1% better? Don't you want to get 1%
absolutely better? Every day. Yeah. Just really appreciate this chat and only just this relationship.
Yeah. It'd be great to keep connecting.
Keep starting years to come.
Connect again, and if we can help each other out, help tennis out, and that's what this podcast is all about. But Ashley, thank you so much. Dave, thanks, and of course the listeners. But as we say, adios amigos. Another podcast in the books. But what we like to think is that people are acquiring gold nuggets for their tennis treasure chest. You certainly have shared a lot of golden nuggets, but I appreciate it. You've had a great journey in tennis, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Good night. Thanks again.
Yeah. Have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah.